a city councilman, 5 acres of discounted land, and a letter comparing a convicted criminal to the Apostle Paul. But here's the twist that Reddit users saw coming months ago. The same man who defended Josh now refuses to believe Joseph is innocent. And that single crack in the wall might be what finally brings the whole Duggar empire down. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are looking at newly released documents that just hit the internet. And I want to start by thanking the community members who helped me understand the full context of what we are about to discuss. Before I even read these documents, members of the Duggar Snark subreddit had already flagged this situation as suspicious. One user created a timeline post tracking every single public official who has received any form of benefit from the Duggar family. That post, which took the user several weeks to compile, names multiple local figures and specifically called out land transfers as the most effective loyalty tool in Jim Bob's arsenal. I want to give credit to that community because their research helped me know exactly what to look for. Now, let me read from the actual documents. While Josh Duggar was incarcerated, he received messages from a man who serves as a city councilman in the town where the Duggars live. This councilman lives on property that backs directly up to the Duggar compound. They are neighbors who share a property line. According to records that have now been obtained by multiple news outlets including People and Radar Online, back in January 2022, Jim Bob Duggar either gave or sold 5 acres of land to this councilman's family. The price was incredibly low. Suspiciously low. One Reddit user described this land deal as the cheapest loyalty purchase in Arkansas real estate history. That same thread had over 300 comments, with multiple users digging up property records and comparing sale prices in the area. The consensus among those users was clear. The price Jim Bob charged was far below market value, and the timing was extremely convenient. Why would Jim Bob sell prime property for a fraction of its value? The answer appears in the very same documents. Shortly after that land deal closed, this same councilman wrote a letter to the judge presiding over Josh's case. In that letter, he claimed that Josh was being framed. He said Josh was innocent. He described Josh as a wonderful human being who was simply the victim of political enemies. I want to share something interesting I found while reading through old Reddit threads. One user made a prediction that I initially thought was too cynical. The user wrote, and I am paraphrasing, "Watch for anyone who gets cheap land or sudden help from Jim Bob. Those people will end up writing letters for Josh." That comment received over 800 upvotes. And now here we are, watching that prediction come true in real time. The Reddit community saw this pattern long before the documents were released. But here is what my initial reading of the documents did not show me. According to additional research I pulled from court records and verified through cross-referencing property documents, this councilman was not the only neighbor who received benefits. There are at least 3 other families in that immediate area who have reportedly received discounted land, free building materials, or other forms of assistance from the Duggar family over the past several years. And at least 2 of those families also submitted character letters for Josh. One Reddit user who claims to have experience in real estate law created a massive thread breaking down every known property transaction involving the Duggar family and their neighbors. That post, which took the user over a month to research according to their own comments, identified multiple transactions that appeared to be significantly below market value. The user concluded that this pattern goes beyond neighborly generosity and looks like a structured system of influence. This is a pattern. This is not random generosity. You give someone a deal they cannot refuse, and suddenly they feel indebted to you. They feel loyal to you. They will write letters. They will speak to judges. They will go on camera and defend you. And the really sad part is that most of these people genuinely believe they are helping a good family. They do not realize they have been strategically positioned. Now, let us talk about why these documents are suddenly available. Because this is another piece of the puzzle that the public records alone do not explain. Back in 2022, when journalists first tried to request these same records from Washington County, they were refused. The sheriff's department and the detention center reportedly refused to release phone records or any communication logs that would show who was actually calling Josh. If you were a journalist working outside the state of Arkansas, you could not get anything. The county would cite Arkansas FOIA laws claiming they did not have to release information to anyone outside the state. But federal law actually requires court information to be public. So something shifted between 2021 and 2022. And now, thanks to a combination of freedom of information requests and persistent journalists, we have over 350 pages of documents. Members of the Fundy Snark and Censored subreddit have been actively discussing FOIA strategies for years. One user, who claims to be a journalist, posted a detailed guide on how to request documents from Arkansas agencies specifically. The guide explained that Washington County had a history of rejecting out-of-state requests and suggested using local addresses or partnering with Arkansas-based researchers. Several commenters shared their own rejection letters from the county, creating a public record of the pattern. I also attempted to request the actual phone calls from Josh's time in detention. And let me tell you, the response was shocking. There are reportedly somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000 calls. The exact number is unclear from the documents. But the detention center wanted nearly $3,000 to release them. They claimed they needed to edit and redact sensitive information. And they would only accept payment via money order, cash, or business check. No credit cards. No online payments. So unless I send someone locally to handle that transaction in person, those calls are going to remain sealed for now. But the emails and text messages we do have are more than enough to paint a disturbing picture. Let me read directly from what this councilman wrote to Josh. And as I read this, I want you to pay attention to the language. Because this is not normal neighbor friendship. This is not how ordinary people write to someone who has been convicted of crimes against children. On Josh's birthday, the councilman wrote something along these lines. I am reading a paraphrased version to protect the exact wording, but the meaning is preserved. He said he knew this was not how Josh hoped to spend his birthday. He said God loves Josh and wants to make him more like him. He described Josh's time in prison as an amazing opportunity to share the gospel with what he called literally a captive audience. Think about that phrase for a moment. A captive audience. These are prisoners who have no choice but to listen. And this councilman, an elected official, was encouraging Josh to view his fellow inmates as missionary opportunities rather than as human beings who also have dignity and rights. When excerpts of this letter first appeared online, the Duggar snark community reacted with immediate recognition. One user wrote, "This is the exact language of someone who has been fully indoctrinated. He doesn't see prisoners as people. He sees them as mission fields." Another user, who claimed to have grown up in a similar religious environment, commented, "I have heard this exact phrase used before. It is taught. It is not original. It comes from missionary training materials that dehumanize the people you are trying to convert." The councilman went on to say that he had visited with Josh's mother and spent time with Anna and the children. He told Josh that he was fearfully and wonderfully made. He said he was glad that God made Josh. He described Josh as a wonderful encouragement and a great friend and neighbor. Then he used a phrase that the Reddit community immediately flagged as significant. He called Josh the Great Connector. This phrase has appeared in multiple contexts on the Duggar Snark subreddit. One user created a thread specifically analyzing Josh's function within the family organization. The user argued that Josh was not just a family member, but the designated recruiter and networker for Jim Bob's religious and political operations. The thread cited multiple examples, including Josh's role in introducing families to the Duggar circle, his connections to political figures, and his ability to make new contacts feel valued and seen. Several commenters on that thread shared personal anecdotes. One commenter wrote, "I met Josh once at a conference years ago. He remembered my name, my wife's name, and where I lived. I had never met him before. It felt flattering at the time. Now it feels creepy." The councilman gave specific examples of how Josh had helped his family. He mentioned Josh delivering anti-diarrheal medicine to them in the middle of the night. He mentioned Josh helping them get a horse trailer. He said Josh was great at connecting people to whatever or whoever they needed. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. He said he heard the spring peepers for the first time that night. Those are the tiny frogs that signal the arrival of spring. He heard them on Josh's birthday. And he wrote that even the spring peepers were wishing Josh a happy birthday. I searched the Reddit archives to see if anyone else had noticed how unusual this line was. And I found a thread where multiple users discussed exactly that sentence. One user wrote, "This is not normal adult friendship. This is the language of someone who has made another person the center of their emotional universe. He is assigning cosmic significance to frogs on a birthday. That is not healthy." Another user added, "This letter reads like a love letter. Not romantic love necessarily, but the kind of devotion usually reserved for a cult leader." The councilman also mentioned that he had missed 2 calls from Josh. He asked Josh to try again. He offered to bless Josh's delightful family. He praised Anna for doing a wonderful job. He said the Duggar children were great little people. He mentioned that one of his own children was telling a story about something funny one of the Duggar kids said. He said he held one of the Duggar babies for the first time. And here's the detail that broke my heart. He said he thought big boys did not get to hold little ones. That is a direct reference to a known Duggar family rule, where older boys are not allowed to hold younger siblings unsupervised. The fact that this councilman knew that rule well enough to joke about it shows how deeply embedded he had become in the family's inner circle. He was not a casual acquaintance. He was inside. This specific rule has been discussed extensively on Reddit. One user traced it back to statements made by the Duggar family themselves, where they explained that older brothers were not allowed to hold younger sisters as a protective measure. The Reddit community has long argued that this rule, while presented as modesty, actually acknowledged an internal awareness of risk. Several commenters noted that the councilman referencing this rule demonstrated that he had been taught the family's internal protocols, not just observed them from a distance. Now let me tell you about how this councilman reportedly came to be so close to the Duggars. According to multiple accounts, his family did not watch the Duggar television show. They did not know much about the family's history before moving next door. They met the Duggars after multiple scandals had already been made public. And yet, within a short period of time, they were fully integrated into the Duggar circle. They started attending church with the Duggars. They went to Silver Dollar City on trips paid for by the Duggars. They allowed their children to play unsupervised with Duggar children. They wrote letters to judges. The Fundy Snark and Censored community has documented this exact recruitment pattern multiple times. One user wrote a detailed breakdown of what they called the Duggar welcome package. It includes discounted or free goods, invitations to family events, childcare assistance, emergency help like the medicine delivery mentioned in the letter, and consistent social attention. The user argued that this approach specifically targets people who are new to the area, who do not have established local support systems, and who are therefore more receptive to intense friendship offers. The councilman and his family fit that profile perfectly. And now, years later, he is reportedly starting to see through the facade. At least when it comes to Joseph. That is why people respect the father. Because in a religious circle where everyone says we need to settle things privately, this man stood up and said no. That is my daughter. I am going to stand up for her. The Duggars were apparently able to influence this councilman when it came to Josh. But the same approach is not working with Joseph. And the reason is simple. The victim is real to him. She is not a face on a screen or a name in a court document. She is someone he has known. One Reddit user summed up this entire dynamic in a single comment that received thousands of upvotes. The user wrote, "Josh's enablers could pretend the victims were abstract because they never had to look them in the eye. Joseph's accuser is sitting in the same church. That changes everything." That comment has been referenced in multiple subsequent threads as the definitive take on why the Duggar family is losing control of this narrative. Now, let me go back to the letter this councilman wrote to the judge in Josh's case. Because reading it again after learning about his position on Joseph reveals something important. He wrote that the Duggar family, through what he called their quiet display of conservative values and their outspoken political views, had inadvertently created a multitude of enemies. He claimed that thousands of people had thanked them for presenting a positive example, but that others had made threats against the family. He said they were photographed secretly wherever they went, that men lurked on their property day and night to get gossip, that even close acquaintances sold them out for a price. Here is my response to that. The Duggar family chose to be on television. Jim, Bob, and Michelle decided to put their children on camera. They sold their family's privacy for money and fame. They exploited their own kids for years. And now they want sympathy because strangers recognize them? No. I am not going to feel sorry for them. The children were exploited, yes. That is tragic. But the parents made those choices. And the adult children have continued to benefit from that fame. You cannot accept the money and then complain about the attention. The Duggar community has discussed this contradiction extensively. One user wrote a thread titled, "You cannot have it both ways," that broke down every instance where family members complained about media attention while simultaneously appearing on television, posting on social media, and selling exclusive stories to magazines. The thread concluded that the Duggars want fame when it brings money and influence. They want privacy when it brings accountability. That is not how reality works. The councilman also claimed that the tabloids reported story after story about what was going on with the family and that nearly none of it was true. But we know from court records, from verified reporting, from the family's own admissions, that much of it was true. The scandals were real. The crimes were real. The victims were real. Then the councilman made a statement that I want to examine carefully. He wrote that Josh did not choose this life for his family. He wrote that Josh continued in the public lifestyle so that he could extend a biblical message of hope to others. He wrote that Josh was willing to publicly admit to past sins and errors. He wrote that men who had battled the same sins as Josh had found encouragement by Josh's commitment to improve himself and his marriage. The same sins. Let us be very clear about what those sins are. We are not talking about gossip. We are not talking about pride. We are not talking about failing to read the Bible enough. We are talking about crimes against children. We are talking about paying for prostitutes. We are talking about downloading and viewing material that victimizes the most vulnerable human beings on earth. And this councilman, an elected official, called those sins. Not crimes. Not atrocities. Not trauma that never goes away for the victims. Sins. As if Josh simply made an error in judgment, the same way someone might tell a lie or lose their temper. This specific language has been criticized extensively across the Duggar community. One user created a post titled, "The Sins vs. Crimes Dictionary of Duggar Defenders." The post compiled examples of the family and their allies using religious minimization to downplay criminal behavior. Examples included calling abuse poor choices, calling child exploitation errors in judgment, and calling solicitation battling the same sins. That post has been saved by over 1,000 users. A comment on that post reads, and I am paraphrasing, "Calling crimes against children a sin is a deliberate choice. It implies forgiveness is possible without justice. It implies the victim's trauma is secondary to the perpetrator's repentance. It is manipulative language designed to protect the abuser, not help the abused." The councilman wrote that Josh was doing Bible studies twice a day while incarcerated. He presented this as evidence of Josh's good character. But here's what I see when I read that. I see manipulation. I see a convicted criminal using religious performance to convince people he is changed. This is a classic tactic. You act holy so people forget what you did. You lead a Bible study so people call you a leader. You pray out loud so people assume your heart is pure. One Reddit user created a detailed thread tracking how Josh used religious language in every single communication from prison. The user analyzed letters, emails, and reported phone calls, identifying patterns in how Josh framed his situation as spiritual warfare rather than criminal justice. The user concluded that real repentance involves accepting responsibility. Josh has never done that. He has always claimed he was framed, that the government targeted him, that the victims were not real. Bible studies do not erase that. The councilman also wrote that Josh was the great connector. And I want to expand on this because it is central to understanding how the Duggar system operates. According to multiple sources, including information shared on Reddit by people who claim to have been in the Duggar orbit, Jim Bob relied heavily on Josh for recruitment precisely because Jim Bob is not as charismatic. Jim Bob is not as good at public speaking. He is not as good at reading people. He is not as smooth. Josh was the one who could walk into a room and make everyone feel special. Josh was the one who could remember your name, your children's names, your birthday. Josh was the one who could make you feel seen. And that is exactly why he was so dangerous. Because predators who are also charming are the hardest to spot. They're the ones who get letters from city councilmen calling them wonderful friends. They're the ones who get discounted land from neighbors who should know better. The Fundy Snark and Censored community has discussed the phenomenon of charming predators extensively. One user wrote a post comparing Josh's behavior to documented patterns of charismatic abusers in other high-control religious groups. The post argued that the charm is not separate from the abuse. It is the tool that enables the abuse. Without the charm, the councilman would never have written that letter. The charm is how Josh gained access to families, to children, to positions of trust. But here is the good news. The dam is breaking. And the crack in the dam is not coming from journalists or YouTube creators. It is coming from within the Duggar network itself. This councilman, despite accepting 5 acres of cheap land, despite writing a glowing letter to a judge, despite calling Josh the Great Connector, does not believe Joseph is innocent. He has reportedly reached out to the victim's family to express support. He has reportedly told others that he does not believe the lies Jim, Bob, and Anna are spreading about the victim's family. One Reddit user made a prediction that I want to share with you. The user wrote, and I am paraphrasing, Tim is the first domino. He accepted the land, he wrote the letter, he was fully in. But now he is questioning Joseph's case. If he flips, others will flip. Because they will realize that if the Duggars lied about Joseph, they lied about everything else too. I hope that prediction is correct. This man holds a position of authority in the town where the Duggars live. He is a representative of all citizens, not just members of one religious group. And if he is starting to see the truth, others will follow. I hope he takes seriously his role in protecting the most vulnerable people in his community. I hope he stops calling crimes against children sins and errors. And I hope the victim in Joseph's case, who has shown incredible bravery, knows that people believe her. Because she could be the one who finally takes down Jim Bob Duggar and the entire family's control. The Duggar dynasty is toppling. What do you think about the councilman's letter? Do you believe he was genuinely manipulated by the Duggar family? Or do you think he understood what he was doing when he accepted that land and wrote to the judge? The Reddit communities are actively discussing this question right now. Some users believe the councilman is a victim of manipulation who is slowly waking up. Others argue that as an elected official, he should have done his research before accepting anything from the Duggar family or writing to a judge. I have seen compelling arguments on both sides. What is your take? Have you been following the discussions on Reddit's Duggar Snark and Fundy Snark and Censored communities? Let me know your perspective in the comments below. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.